So, Paul, last week we talked about well-being, and what stuck with me is this: health is still fundamental to doing great work, but it still feels ignored. Is that fair?
I think that if you spoke to most larger organizations, they would disagree with that a lot, right? And the reason that I think they would disagree with it is they would say, well, hang on, we've got employee assistance programs that we never had before. We've invested in mental health in the workplace, programs associated with that. Maybe they've got like the free gym memberships for people. They've got this slew of services that have been hard fought for and hard won inside organizations that are radically different than was around when, I'm old. So like when I started in the when I started in the workplace, those things didn't exist.
Right.
And now they're commonplace inside organizations. So that is one side of that debate. They're saying, look, this is like we've never looked after our employees better in terms of their physical and their mental health than we ever have. And you can even add additional things onto that, like things like ergonomics programs and
Sure.
all of that kind of stuff. And yet, we live in a world where the world in which people are going to work is significantly less healthy than it was. Right? Mental health stats are terrible. Obesity stats are terrible. In the U.S., but also increasingly in some other countries as well, life expectancy is down, and not just related to the pandemic, but down more broadly. Over the course of the last 20 plus years or so, maybe a little bit more, the number of people who are having to care for an elderly relative, right, or that are full-time carers while they're trying to do their work has doubled, right? So it is an environment, the work environment, which is part of the broader environment, is an environment that involves people that in general are much less healthy than they used to be. So I think that is that's the challenge here, right? Those things that we're talking about are almost like a response in a way to the fact that we are working sicker than we were before.
Yeah, I mean, if we're supposedly prioritizing it in the workplace and showing up sicker, something is wrong in that sense, right?
Yeah, precisely. I mean, I think it's just that it's we've looked at it as employees are requesting this, employees are asking for this, whether that's direct employees directly or unions on behalf of employees or associations on behalf of employees. We're responding to this because employees are asking for this. But what we should be doing, I believe, is we should be thinking about the fact that people are spending, X percent of their waking hours with us, and there's some form of a duty of care associated with those people spending that time with you, right? Most of us spend more hours engaging actively in work than we spend engaging actively with our loved ones. So there should, theoretically, there should be some duty of care associated with that. And the real question is, do we believe, and I personally do we believe that work is part of the problem here? The work is actually making us sick in many cases. And so if you can directly tie a line to that, then there's obviously the duty of care, right? So, if you send people down a coal mine and they get lung disease, there's there's a duty of care associated with that. In this
Mm-hmm.
case, it's a little bit less clear what that
Right.
through line is, but everything that I've seen over the course of my work suggests that there is a strong through line.
So how do we approach this differently?
Well, I think what I would suggest is that everything I'm about to say here is an and, not an or, right? I mean, it's great that we have all of these programs that are important, but I think it's a little bit of a cultural reset, and that cultural reset starts with embracing the concept. Even I understand why organizations don't want to do this. They maybe are worried about things like litigation and all that kind of stuff, right? But identifying the idea that work can be hazardous to our health, including the work that involves you just sitting in front of a computer, right? And how do you go about taking steps in order to be able to mitigate that? And ironically, steps might be one of the things you do, right? Which is, okay, if sitting at your desk is making you sick, then moving helps. Is one of the things that helps mitigate that. Yeah. But I think that this is again, if you look about the challenge we have here, the programmatic stuff that I was talking about, that's done at an organizational level. A lot of what needs to happen here is actually much more local than that, right? It's what happens in your group, it's what happens in your team, and it's what happens for you as an individual. So we've got to kind of localize this idea of healthy work practices, and we need to embrace it as a critical part that allows us to be able to do good work. And that ties back to some of the stuff we were talking about before, right? Not everybody is going to be like wanting to focus on wellness and well-being and so on. We didn't talk about this last time, but there's almost a fear among some people that if you do focus on things like well-being and health and so on, you're not going to look as good as if you're carrying 20 extra pounds. The focus is going to draw attention to you because you're not as healthy as other people, or maybe you're worried about even talking about those things because it starts to draw you to think about your mortality. But what you can do is you can reframe it in the ways that we were talking about last week, is like, okay, well, in order for us to be able to do this stuff well, we need to be ready to do it well, and that's going to mean different things to different people. But it's something that we agree is important, right? It's important to for people to not get sick and die.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned RMS, the rest movement, socializing, as a simple stack for readiness and being helping this out. But is that too simple? When do you move to something deeper, like your 8 dimensions?
It can be too simple in some cases. We talked about the value of it last time, and I think it represents a great starting point and a great measure, actually, right? That's the other thing as well that is really interesting about RMS, is that, like, I can track the rest I have, right? Like, I'm wearing an Aura ring right now. It's telling me, am I rested? It's also telling me, am I stressed, right? It's telling me, it's telling me a bunch of stuff about myself, and I can track that. And it's telling me, am I moving? Right? It's telling me the number of steps that I have. So there's a metric that is associated with that as I'm looking to see how sedentary I am, how much I'm moving. But I can track the other things too, right? I can track, I've just mentioned the rest and the movement, but I can track the socialization piece as well, right? Did I, you and I are yes, we're doing our podcast, but we're socializing, right? You and I chatted for 45 minutes before we started this, right?
Yeah.
It was a social activity that was beneficial for me, and hopefully it's beneficial for you, right? So these things can be tracked, right? And so that's one of the things that is really, really helpful. Now, where 8 dimensions comes in, and 8 dimensions is really helpful. We won't go into details of what 8 dimensions is on here, but you can look it up. We've got stuff about it on our own website, on the Billion Minds website. We'll put a link to that into the show notes. Where that can be helpful is the completeness of it, right? So For example, one of the dimensions is financial, right? So um, it can be useful as a diagnostic aid to help you understand where you're struggling, right? And maybe it's not one of the dimensions that we talked about here, and maybe it's something else, like you're struggling to pay the bills or whatever. So these different sort of viewpoints can happen individual, really understand where they're doing well and
Yeah.
where they're struggling. Where RMS comes in really well is the sort of ability to be able to rally individuals and rally even teams around the idea of like, this is what we're going to do to make sure that we're ready to do good work. And you
Yeah.
can set targets around that, and you can have
Sure.
sort of competitive and collaborative stuff associated with it. So I think
Hmm.
that's actually kind of a role for both.
Okay. Good. Good. So in general, do you see this shifting and changing? What's going to force the shifts in this from treat it when it breaks to generally genuinely designing for health despite the current kind of suck it up climate?
Yeah, I mean, culture shifts all the time. So, like, anytime we think that we're in a particular culture, we're probably half of our way out of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I'm sure part of this will be cyclical anyway. Um, but but I do think that we're it's going to be very, very interesting as people really, really internalize the fact that the stuff that is in quotes coming for our jobs, robots, AI, etc. One of the things about them that is fundamentally different to humans is they don't get tired and they don't get sick. And so now humans will always get tired, right? like
Mm.
like you can't work if I work you 24 hours a day, you're going to get tired, right? If I work you 12 hours a day consistently, right, you're going to get tired. But what I think I'm saying instead is that um, if you have this understanding that the thing that is part of your world doesn't function at 70%, right? Um, you then start to think about what does it mean to function really well as a human.
Mm.
And so I think part of where the shift is going to come is where organizations go, you know what I really need in order to be able to differentiate myself from my competition is, yes, I need good technology, I need a good stack, but I need a set of high performing individuals and high performing teams that are going to really use that. And in order to have those higher performing teams and individuals, those high performing teams and individuals need to be able to function well, which means that they need to be well. And so I think once we sort of get to that idea that being well is some form of a strategic advantage,
Mm.
and that it doesn't mean driving everybody into the ground. It means being awake and alert enough that you can make that interesting connection between thing A and thing B, right? It means being able to be able to work without fear. It means being able to work in an environment where you're always not feeling semi burned out. And then we start to treat our employees like athletes
Yeah.
and making sure that they're ready to be able to do their best work.
Mm.
That'll come, I suspect, once we really start to internalize a lot of these lessons from sports science, but also see the impact of this new
Mm.
technology.
Yeah. As always, very enlightening. All right. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, man. Have a good one.